Well, hello friends. Welcome to the SerenityOS update for September 2021. It has been a nice and calm month in the project. We've had about 1,800 commits from 72 different people, and we were at about 15 pull requests getting merged per day. So very nice tempo. I think we're finding our groove here at the moment, and I quite like it. And I did a lot of work on browser stuff this month, a lot of CSS, JavaScript, and random web APIs. And I've been having a lot of fun with that, but there's also been work all over the system as always. So let's just take a look around and see some new stuff. So here we are on the September edition of the SerenityOS desktop. Let's have a look around, starting with font editor. So a bunch of font related things this month. We have a new format for bitmap fonts, which allows more space efficient storage. So previously, if you wanted to put glyphs high up in the Unicode ranges, then you had to make the font file really large to accommodate that. And the font format is now segmented instead, so that you can put a little glyph somewhere up in the high numbers. So that's very nice. And we also have font slope. This one is regular, but if we open up Serifina Italica, a new font here, we can see an example of an italic slope font. And all of the aforementioned things were implemented by Thank You Very Cool, including this new font here. So thank you Very Cool. Very cool. And actually, I feel like I haven't been showing the font editor too much lately. So let me show you that the preview thingy is actually now a separate window that you can open if you want to have a testing area for typing with the new font. And this just allows you to see what the new font would look like with any sentence you want to mess with. You can also randomize some interesting existing sentences. And you can disable the metadata pane here, which I quite like, because maybe I'm fine with the metadata and now I just want to see all the glyphs that I need to be drawing. That's quite many, actually. The Unicode range is large. And something that is really helpful if you're working on fonts is this go to glyph feature here, which allows you to type in a code point and then it just jumps directly to that code point. So if you know which code point you want to draw a glyph for, then you can use that and you don't have to sort of hunt for it by like scrolling around this impossibly large glyph map. So anyway, just some stuff that's cool. And also, of course, new font brings up this sweet wizard where you can follow this guide to create a new font. It's I don't know, it's just I really like this application. It feels very nice and polished, although it left a preview window on screen after I closed the main window, so some polish still to be done. Anyway, let's look at some other stuff. So another thing that's new this month is bilinear filtering. So if we open up a little images test page here, we can see some zoomed in image. And previously we would render scaled images with nearest neighbor filtering. And now we instead do bilinear filtering for that like fuzzy look. And sometimes most of the time it looks better. For some things it looks worse, but it feels like a nicer thing in the great scheme of things. So let me bring up magnifier so I can show you here that if we zoom in, you can see that these are a little fuzzy because they're zoomed in, and these are also a little fuzzy just in a different way because it's zoomed out. This nice looking scaling stuff was implemented by Sam. So thank you, Sam, for working on that. And actually, since I have magnifier open, magnifier has a new 8x mode. If 2x and 4x were not enough for you, Marcus has added 8x for extreme magnification. And he also added a mode where you press space and it locks the magnifier view in place. So once you magnified whatever it is you want to magnify, you can hit space and keep it that way. And then, if you want to use it as a reference for image editing or whatever, then it stays that way. So pretty cool feature. Thank you, Marcus, for working on that. And actually kind of related to bilinear filtering, but not really, but kind of, is we now have anti-aliased path drawing. So Ali implemented a very basic anti-aliased path renderer that we use here for SVG, so we don't get jagged outlines on them. It's not perfect, needs more work, but it is a start. And it's nice to see us moving towards nicer looking vector graphics, one little step at a time. Anyway, some other things. Let's see. Since I mentioned Marcus, he did something else that I also enjoyed, which was automatic scrolling of views. So if I drag this file here and I want to drop it in some other directory, but the directory I want to drop it into is not visible in the view, I can now just move that thing to the bottom and it starts to scroll by itself. And of course it scrolls at the top as well. And this is one of those things that's just a super duper piece of polish, I think, and just feels so right. And it makes you wonder why we didn't have it before. So super thank you to Marcus for implementing that. And let's see. Wait, what else did I want to show you? I guess we can talk about common mark specs since it's here. Peter has been doing a bunch of work on our Markdown implementation, and I can't easily show it to you, but he's improving our spec compliance and using the common mark test suite as a way to drive that work, steadily increasing our test scores. So that's pretty cool. And also the README crashes when I open it in text editor. That's not super good. But you know how these things go. Can't really have a monthly update video without anything going wrong. So I don't know what that's about, but actually that does give me an opening to, if it reproduces, talk about something else, which is this little progress dialog. So now when something crashes in Serenity, we throw up a progress dialog immediately or as soon as possible, telling you that like, oh, we're generating a crash report, because previously you had to wait sometimes for quite a while after something crashed before you would learn that it had crashed. And we were actually doing a bunch of silly things like generating a backtrace twice before showing it to you. And now we only do it the one time, and we throw up this progress dialog as soon as possible after we detect a crash, so that we can inform you about how that crash report generation is going. And I have to say, since I see a lot of crashes, I really enjoy this little feature, because it's so much nicer when something goes wrong that you learn about it right away. Both in programming and in life. When something has gone wrong, you don't want to not know about it. Or you don't want to sit there wondering what is up. Why is the CPU spinning? My program is not doing anything, and what am I waiting for? Now it will tell you right away that you're waiting for a crash report. Anyway, so what else can we talk about? I guess, something I've been doing in the kernel this month was, so I have to give you an example actually, because this is a programming pattern that we have been adopting. So we have this mechanism in the kernel where we return something called a k-result or, which is either a k-result or something else. And if it's an error, then we return a k-result. So what this might look like is something like this. So like do thing, right? Which is going to return either a k-result, so some kind of error code, or it will return a size t. And what this thing might do then is maybe it needs a foo, so it would get a foo. But if that goes wrong, then maybe that's an error, so we have to return that. And then maybe we also need a bar. So we would have to get one of those. And if that goes wrong, we have to check if that goes wrong and then return bar error. And then finally, we can combine those two things to do the thing. So foo.value and bar.value. And this is really verbose, but this is basically how our code has looked until just recently. This month we came up with a new thing that allows us to write this way instead. So let me repeat this, but in the new style. So what we have added is a try macro, which kind of encapsulates what you see above, but takes care of the error handling. So if an error is returned, it will return that for you. So now we can simply do this. Combine foo and bar. And this is significantly more ergonomic, and it's just so much nicer to write code this way. And actually, maybe you noticed that I didn't even have to dot value these guys right here, because what we would really do before, I didn't even type it out because it's so cumbersome. But what we were actually doing is this. So that, and then bar or error. Oops. Like that. And we also would have something like auto foo is foo or error release value. This is what we were doing before. And if you worked on Serenity, especially in the kernel, then you're familiar with this pattern. Should look familiar to you. And we just had this everywhere, and this is clearly so much nicer. I really love it. And I spent multiple days just converting code from this style to this style. And the try macro is pretty clever. It uses a GCC extension to the C++ language, but is also supported by Clang. In order to accomplish this whole thing cleanly. And then there are two big benefits to this, really. The first thing is that it's very, very nice, like ergonomics wise. Just when you're writing code, obviously, if you can express what you want to say this easily, that's a big improvement. But it also encourages error propagation, where previously we have been a bit bad at propagating errors deep inside libraries to the sort of API boundary, because basically propagating errors meant that you had to do a whole bunch of this. And we've been pretty good about this type of stuff in the kernel, but user space has been not very good about it. But now that we have this new tool, it instead becomes very sort of motivating almost to start returning these result OR types and using try to do error propagation. And there's been a lot of work on the JavaScript engine recently, for example, just converting it to this type of style, and it's been great. But there's still a lot of ground to cover. It's just I just wanted to show this off because I'm so happy with this pattern. And it's one of those things where I wish the C++ language would give us sort of a native construct for this. But since we don't have that, this is the second best thing. So now we're doing this. Anyway, that's just something I wanted to talk about. So now I'm just going to hand it over to Linus, who is going to talk about web technology stuff. So take it away, Linus.
So let's look at the libgs changes from September. First of all, our test262 score, as usual. So we still run the test262 JavaScript test suite on every merge PR, and then we store the results, and then we have a graph where we see how much we improve over time, basically. Started the month at 64.6% and are now up to almost 70%, so a solid increase. And one special milestone this month was that we surpassed the Chakra core JavaScript engine, which is used in legacy Microsoft Edge, so basically before they switched to Chromium and V8. Let's have a look at some changes. So first of all, David implemented public fields and classes. So we already had classes and methods, but now you can do something like this, class foo, and you can either say static, which is going to be a static class field, static field is 1, or you just omit that and say instance field is 2. And so now when I just say foo dot the static field, then that's going to be recognized. So that's defined on the class itself. But if I say I make a new foo, that's going to be undefined because it's not on the instance. And for the instance field, it just works the other way around. So, and if I omit that, don't make a new foo, it's going to be undefined. Eden and I, and also Luke joined us. We continued on the temporal proposal implementation, are now about 75% done. We also included the ECMA 402 changes, which previously were out of scope, but now that we have an increasing number of ECMA 402 things implemented in our engine, that's also in scope. So that's the internationalization API. Just nothing really completely new, just adding more methods, basically. Tim continued on the Intel implementation. So we got new this month, intel.locale, list format, and number format. So let's have a look at list format, for example. So I can make a formatter, it's a new intel.list format, and I say a local en and style long, and then I can say formatter.format, and I pass an array, let's say foo bar, and then we'll say, like, make a sentence foo and bar, and if I add another element, bars, it's going to say foo bar with a comma and then and bars. And so that works with all the supported languages that we have from Unicode. Another thing that Tim did is update our Unicode to version 14, which got recently released, so that's up to date now. And then David did a massive PR to rework how variables and scoping work. So he replaced a ton of old ad hoc solutions and removed hacks and all that. So that fixed 1,500 tests at once. So that's something we never had before. A really, really great work. It also fixes a long-standing bug in the REPL where you would say const foo equals 1, and then the next time you access that foo, the REPL wouldn't recognize it anymore because it's like in a scope that's already gone. So really good work on that. And Ali implemented optional chaining. So that's when you say you have an object, foo, oh, it's const. So make a new REPL here, object foo, and when you say foo.bar, so that obviously doesn't exist and is undefined. But now if you say foo.bar.bars, that's going to throw because the bar's already undefined. But like if you're not sure if the thing is going to exist or be null or undefined, you can just say question mark period, and then it's going to ignore everything afterwards if it's null or undefined. So that's optional chaining. And then we did a whole lot of refactoring and architectural changes, which are kind of hard to showcase, but I still want to mention them. So Andreas started working on script records, which is basically the spec, but either scripts or modules. And we only had a ast.program class, which basically was similar to script, but not completely the same. So just working towards the spec here. I added realms. So we previously abused global objects as realms, basically, sort of. But it really should be a realm, and on that realm should be a global object and environment. And that's also important because it's often referenced in the various web specs. And then things get confusing if we do it differently. That's ongoing. Tim added something called the prototype object to share a lot of functionality that all the prototypes need across objects. So previously we had like different implementations for check the this object. If it's not of this type, throw, otherwise cast it. So that's now deduplicated. A really big change is we're moving towards something from the spec called completions, which is like a little structure for return or throw values, basically. So how it previously worked is we would either return a value or we would throw an exception, store it on the VM, and then return an empty value. And then you had to remember to like check exception at the core side, otherwise things would blow up pretty quickly. And now that's basically completion. So it's either a normal completion or a throw completion, and then you already know whether you are going to have an exception. And we can also make it a compile time error if you forget to check for exceptions. So that's also ongoing, but it's going to be a massive improvement. What else? Andreas did some performance improvements, a lot in the parser, for example, just avoiding needless allocations, adding some fast paths. An interesting change is we increased the time between garbage collections, or not time, but amount of allocated objects before it would do a GC. So that's basically we now want to avoid the time spent in GC and risk allocating more memory instead. So basically a trade-off. Yeah, that's it basically. And back to Andreas.
All right, thank you, Linus. Now let's continue looking at other desktop stuff. So a little piece of polish that I wanted to show you is here in the system monitor. We now show memory sizes as megabytes instead of kilobytes. And it's a tiny little thing, but it makes a lot of sense. And this was done by Julian. So thank you, Julian, for this very thoughtful change. And it is... It's interesting to see these numbers, actually. It's a little bit concerning how large some of them are. Like, why is the network applet using 4 megabytes of memory? Wait, what's going on here? If we look at the memory map, look at dirty. So we have, 50 kilobytes of stuff. Oh, I guess we can sort these. Oh, who's that? Who are you, Mr. libunicode? Read-only relocations. Almost 4 megabytes. So that's definitely not good. libunicode. Okay, so probably all these guys link against libunicode, and okay, that's probably that. Yeah, so there's an issue that we need to take care of at some point. Every app who uses libunicode, which is many of them, has to pay almost 4 megabytes of memory just for that. And I only noticed because of Julian's change. So thank you again, Julian. And let's see if we can get that Unicode thing fixed. But anyway, another random polished thing actually that I forgot about here in System Monitor is if you open up the stack view, then it now shows the object file name of each stack frame. So previously, it only showed the name of the function at every step of the backtrace. But now we also show which object file it's from. It's a nice little thing. And I'm sure we can improve this UI further, but it's still, I like incremental polish. And that was done by Rodrigo. So thank you, Rodrigo, for that. And something else that stood out to me this month was in Space Analyzer, which is how we visualize where all your hard drive space is going. As you can see here, libweb is consistently growing. Now our largest library at 27 megabytes. And the breadcrumb bar up here that points you to libweb now has icons. So previously it was text only, but David went and put icons on this breadcrumb bar, which is just so obvious when you see it that this is the way it's supposed to be. But I love it when people take the time to think of these things, right? These things that elevate the quality of the system. So thank you very much, David, Julie, and Rodrigo, and everybody else who's been doing random polish things. I really, really appreciate when people do that. So super thanks. And now let's have a look at the app that has been receiving the most love this month, which is Pixel Paint. So a bunch of people have worked on it this month. It's been pretty cool to see, actually. So first thing we'll notice is these rulers here. So we now have rulers that follow the mouse cursor. And if you zoom in, of course, the rulers rescale. And I think it's a very, very handy feature. And it was added by David, who did them. Yeah, I think it was David. So thank you, David, for adding the rulers. And what else was going to say? I keep confusing rulers with guides, but guides are different. Guides were added by Tobias, and I think I showed guides actually last month. So let me actually not get confused about what month it is. But new things. So Karol added this thing where you can now middle click an open image to close it, the same as the browser where you can middle clicking a tab means closing the tab. So we try to be consistent about that. We now have a clone tool here, which was added by Mustafa. So let me set an area for cloning, and then see, it's a clone brush. Look at those smooth outlines. Very, very cool, actually. I love that this application now has a clone tool of all things. And it just keeps getting more interesting. And I think somebody said that their goal for Pixel Paint was to make it convenient enough that you would want to spin it up rather than your other application for image editing. So that's a goal I heartily support. I would love to see the application get to that place. And some other stuff that we have, actually, if we zoom in, if you zoom in far enough, then you now get a pixel grid, which is super duper handy. And it's something that I've always missed because Paintbrush back in Windows 3.1 would do this. If you zoomed in, you would get this grid where you could see each individual pixel if you were zoomed in far enough. And it's just such a handy, cool feature, I think. And I love that we have that. And I think it was Mustafa who did that as well. So Mustafa has been doing great stuff on Pixel Paint. So that's really, really cool. And I don't know, let's just look through random stuff Mustafa has done. So I know he did the aspect ratio, so you can punch in like an aspect ratio like 4:3 for rectangle, and then it allows you to draw a perfect 4:3 rectangle pretty cool. I think he added the thickness for rectangle, so you can draw a rectangle with a specific thickness. Although there seems to be a little bit of a repaint problem there. Let's see if we move it around. No, that's just a bug. Okay, so it just doesn't fill those pixels. Okay, well, that's a fix me. Still, that's very, very cool. And Mustafa also did crop to selection, I think it was. So image crop to selection. Look at that, behaves exactly as you would expect it to. I press undo and it crashes. That's not very good, but let's ignore that and get back on track. So yeah, that was really sweet. The crop thing, like crop to selection, it crops and it keeps the view where it is, so that like, the cropped image doesn't move. That's actually a really nice touch. I quite like that. And what was I thinking of? Oh, this these marching ants look a little bit weird at different scales, actually. I'm just starting to notice these little tiny things that we need to fix, but let me not get carried away with random little things. So Casper also did something here. I think it was if you hold shift when you draw a rectangle, for example, it now constrains it to a square, so that if you want to do a rectangle, you just don't hold shift. If you hold shift, now you're making a square. Very, very typical feature, but a very nice feature nonetheless. Also works for circles. If you want to draw a circle instead of an ellipse, then just hold the shift key. We got a image filter called invert. So you can actually press Control I to invert. That was added by Musab. So thank you, Musab, for working on that. There's so many things there. I'm just going to show some ones. So we got flip horizontally, flip vertically. Both of those are Mustafa. Rotate left, rotate right. Both of those are also Mustafa, I think. Oh, I can keep the menu open when I do that. That's pretty cool. Oh, is that a redraw glitch? Yes, it is. Aha. Okay, we have to fix that. So if I hold Control when I click on these menu items, then it doesn't close the menu, and then we get a repaint glitch where it doesn't update post rotation. Still, very, very cool. So many cool features in Pixel Paint this month. I love seeing this application grow. Like it was like almost stagnant for many months, and now it has this active group of people hacking on it. It's so much fun to see. And oh, here are some new things too, actually, these icons. So new layer, and select top layer, select bottom layer. These are all new action icons that Marcus drew. So thank you, Marcus, for drawing icons. Absolutely love it when people draw high quality icons and add to the system. And I trying to think of something more that we had. There's probably more stuff. I know that the erase tool changed a bit this month. So the some of the tools were redrawn or rewritten to take better advantage of each other, basically. So like the erase tool now inherits from the brush tool, and as you can see, that gives you the ability to erase sort of smudgily instead of just a hard erase. And erase now also erases with alpha, so you see that we're actually erasing a hole into the image and everything. And very, very cool stuff. I think that was Mustafa as well. I just huge thank you to Mustafa and everybody who's been hacking on Pixel Paint this month. It is really awesome to see. And I'm going to talk about something else now. So the Profiler, which is one of my favorite applications, has not received that much work this month, but let's get a small profile and let me show you something. So, oh, we didn't get many samples here, actually. Let me get a bigger profile. Klook. Okay, that's a bigger profile. And the thing that we have now is we should have a search. So if you start typing here, like web : frame, blah, 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 it actually is incrementally searching through the profile. So very, very handy when you're working with these bigger profiles and you've made some change and you've gotten a new profile and you want to see like, okay, so this thing that I was trying to make faster, where is it now in the great scheme of things? So you try to look for it, but it's much easier if you can just type the name of it. So, so that's awesome. So thank you, Ali, for adding incremental search to the profiler. And then we have a bunch of sort of outside things that are hard to demonstrate, but Brian added a lock rank tracking to the kernel. So various mutexes and spin locks now have a rank. And if you try to take locks in the wrong order, we can sort of give you a very informative error about what you're doing wrong. And it helps us catch deadlocks much, much faster because we can tell you exactly that, oh, you're taking these two locks in the wrong order. So thank you very much, Brian, for working on that. Tom has added support for X2 APIC, which means that we now support huge numbers of CPUs. I think we're limited to 64 CPUs at the moment because of a hard-coded data structure size. But we could change that to support more CPUs, but that's pretty cool. So thank you, Tom. And Synac fixed a long-standing socket leak in the kernel, which was really, really nice. We were accumulating sockets forever and never freeing them, which was just leaking memory, basically. And that was really awesome. And it led to a bunch of related fixes as well. So thank you, Synac. And Andrew worked on build system stuff. So we've had a big CMake build system overhaul where we now build Serenity as what it's called a super build, where we have two separate projects. One is our host tools that are built on Linux or Mac OS or FreeBSD or whatever you're using to build Serenity. And then we have a separate build for Serenity itself. So basically, first you build the Serenity tool chain or whatever, and then you build Serenity using the tools you built from the first thing. And it's just a much cleaner, much nicer approach to CMake. We had been doing some pretty nasty hacks to get our build working, and now we are just a lot cleaner and nicer, which feels good. So I really appreciate Andrew putting in all that hard work into that. It's one of those things where it's easy to forget that the quality of life can be improved so much by improving the meta around the project as well. Not just hacking on Serenity and its libraries, but like the build system and the infrastructure around it. So shout outs to everybody who has been working on infrastructure. That is super appreciated, especially by myself, but really by everybody who works on the project and benefits from all the great work. So that's cool. And the final thing that I want to mention is the Brian got us up and running on Sonar Cloud, which is a C++ static analysis software in the cloud. So we now have nightly, I think, runs of Sonar Cloud or Sonar Cube that runs on the entire Serenity project. And Brian has been doing a bunch of work on fixing issues found by static analysis. So it's been quite fruitful so far, found a lot of real bugs. And that's awesome. So thank you, Brian, for setting that up. And we actually have a link to the Sonar Cloud instance on our GitHub project page if you want to take a look at that. It does say that we have 0 vulnerabilities or 0 security issues. So I think you need to take that with a grain of salt. But our code base is a little bit unusual, so I can understand that they're not used to analyzing such an idiosyncratic piece of C++. But as I said, it does highlight real bugs. So we have been using it with great results so far. And we will continue doing that because now it's set up to run continuously. So, yeah.
So let's look at the browser changes this month. There's been a lot of work on the browser by various people. So first of all, Luke added a bot controller and a bot signal, which is commonly used for aborting fetch requests. So if you provide a controller and then trigger that signal, it's going to abort the request. We don't have fetch yet, but it's certainly a step into that direction. Sam added window.scroll, so basically scrolling the web page from JavaScript. So we're on that welcome page here, and then can say window.scroll, that's going to be X and Y. So we don't want X, but let's say a 400 down. And it's going to scroll the page for us. And there's also relative scrolling, so scroll by. Where did it go? Oh, scroll by, let's say 40 pixel, and then I can go down relative. So that's very nice. Sam also worked a lot on the CSS parser again. Just a lot of fixes and general improvements. Also adding new stuff like current color. So that's still ongoing. Ethan added the URL constructor and URL search params. So I can now pass a URL from JavaScript. So if I say http example.com/foo, it's going to pass into a URL object, and then I can query dot hostname, for example, and it's going to give example.com, or I can also say path name. It's going to give us d/foo. So that's really, really common across the web, just whenever you need to pass a URL, basically. Andreas added or worked on some improvements for SVG. So we already had some basic SVG support. He added view box, which is like the frame, or like relatively, where the coordinates are rendered inside the SVG, and also curves and paths, and some improvements on the general layouting of the SVG element. And then Sam added styling of SVG from CSS, so that's the fill, stroke, and stroke color properties. And finally, Ali added anti-aliasing. So I think we have a demo for that. Let me find it. Features. Alright, it's up here. So SVG, which is the old demo. So if you compare that to the previous one, it was a lot more pixelated, and now it's drawing smooth lines and curves. So that's really nice. Sam also worked on better styling support for inline elements. So instead of block elements, like if you style a single span in a text, for example, in a paragraph, demo for that is down here. So you see, like, you can add background color, different text colors, shadow, borders. So that was previously not supported. Sam also added bilinear image blending. So previously, if we scaled images, they would look kind of strange, because like there was no blending, but it was just like scaling up the pixels. So if we look at the image element demo, which is up here, you can see that he added images in various sizes. So, for example, the bottom one is obviously larger than the original, and now it's like slightly blurred, but not pixelated anymore. And same for the ones that are scaled down, which just makes it look a lot better. And then finally, Luke added support for dataset, which is basically data attribute querying from JavaScript. So if I say document.body.dataset, then we got like an empty string map. And if I put a data dash property on the body using set attribute, like data dash foo, and then set a value bar. Now that body dataset is going to contain a foo property with the bar value. So that's also very common across the web, so nice to have. And then we also did some work on performance. So for example, first of all, before that, Brian added some performance logging. So whenever a request is done, we now compute the time that took and whether it in the end failed or not. And that's just for better visibility, because we can just log that to the console, and until requests are a bit more reliable, it's going to be very useful. Andreas added the same for scripts, so it's going to show you which script is running and how long it took, just for optimizing JavaScript. Some more improvements in the JS console is Sam added $0 support. So when you select an element in the DOM inspector, it's going to magically be assigned to the $0 variable, which is quite useful for debugging. Luke worked a lot on the IDL parser and wrapper generator, for example, adding the any type, which is basically any JavaScript value. Then also new, but not really showcaseable, is the support for the HTML event loop. So previously would just immediately execute, for example, event callbacks. And now that's a bit more closer to the spec and delayed to certain points. Also new this month is computed style, which even got its own video. So if you're interested in that, you can watch that on the channel here on YouTube. What else? Tobias worked a lot on Flexbox. So again, improving what we already had. Also working a lot with real-world websites, so viewing pages that then don't render properly and investigating. Also some basic support for align items and the transform property, so translate X, translate Y. I think that's it. And back to Andreas.
So I think that's everything that we had to show you today. Thank you so much for checking in and staying up to date with the project. Since May of this year, I am working on SerenityOS full-time. So my work is funded completely by viewers and fans of the system. And if you would like to help me continue working on it, then please check out my links in the video description for that. And you can also support Linus. Linus does a huge amount of work on SerenityOS as well. And he's growing his own supporter base on GitHub sponsors. And you can find links to Linus in the video description below. So from the both of us, a huge thank you to everybody who's supporting this project and helping us move it forward. If you want to come chat, we have the Discord server, so come join us. There's a link to that in the video description. And I also host the weekly live stream here on YouTube every Friday at 4 p.m. Swedish time. It's called SerenityOS Office Hours, and everybody is welcome to ask whatever they want about SerenityOS. So come by. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you so much for visiting, and I will see you next time. Bye.